Australia has decided to increase its navy. Its surface combatant force in particular is planned to eventually increase from today's 11 ships to some 26. That's 2.4 times more. Tonnage-wise, the increase is to be almost as impressive. Those 11 ships today display some 50,000 metric tons. The future 26-ship fleet will likely displace over 110,000 metric tons. Submarine increases planned will be even more impressive. So it's not just some number-chasing initiative filled out with small ships. The majority of the new ships will indeed be large, very capable combat vessels. Plus, Australia is said to use optionally manned combat ships, which will be a first together with the US Navy. To learn more about Australia's Navy plans in detail, stay tuned. The Australian 2023 Defence Strategic Review paper concluded that the strategic context has changed and that the Australian Navy needs to, quote, shape the strategic environment, deter potential adversaries and deny their ability to achieve objectives contrary to Australian national interests, end quote. That's a fairly generic piece of text, but the underlying repeated mentions of a changed strategic environment basically focus on China. The Australian government then funded an independent analysis of Australian Navy capability and future needs. Said analysis was led by retired US Navy Vice Admiral Hillardies, former Australian Vice Admiral Meyer and former Australian Secretary of Department of Finance, Huxtable. While the full analysis is confidential, the government did release a shorter report. But most importantly, what the analysis proposed was in the most part accepted by the Australian government. So it's more or less a plan now, with the only question being money and time to actually pull it off. Today the Australian surface combatant fleet is made of 11 ships. 3 are Hobart-class destroyers. Those are tasked with air defense primarily. They house the US-made Aegis combat management system. They're all new ships commissioned between 2017 and 2020, and they're capable enough ships for their size, with modernized SPY radar arrays and 48 vertical launch missile cells. The remaining 8 ships are the Anzac-class frigates. Those are much smaller at 3,600 tons. Their role is geared more towards anti-submarine work, but they have been modernized with new electronics and radars. Anzacs are based on German Mako 200 design, though that design is quite modular and changeable as it is. Australian ships were commissioned between 1996 and 2006, so some of them are getting old. Indeed, the first Anzac is scheduled for retirement this year. To just give some context to those figures, we can compare them to Australia's neighbors' navies, Indonesian, Japanese and Chinese ones. Indonesia lacks destroyers completely, though it has over 30 smaller ships of under 1,000 tons. Japan's fleet is roughly 4 times more numerous than Australia's, and is converting 2 of its helicopter carriers into aircraft carriers to use vertical landing fighter jets. China's navy is of course by far the biggest, using nuclear-fueled subs, larger aircraft carriers and many more ships. It's roughly 2 times as numerous as Australia's and Japan's navies combined, and 2 times bigger in total displacement, so it's no wonder Australia is keen to increase its numbers. The Australian plan is this: keep the Hobarts as they're potent and new. Add 6 new large ships to that so-called first tier force, so there would be 9 ships in total compared to today's 3 ships, a 300% increase. Then replace all the Anzac frigates with a new class of frigates, 11 of them. That's a nearly 40% increase. And on top of that, add 6 new optionally manned corvette-sized ships, but more on those later. 6 large ships are already known. They're the Hunter-class heavy frigate. They will displace more than the current Hobart destroyers. Yeah, today the terms frigate or destroyer are largely arbitrary. Those have been planned for several years now, and since 2018 it was known that the British BAE Systems design, Type 26 frigate, was the winning design. Hunters will focus on anti-submarine warfare, but due to their size they will really be true multi-purpose ships. They will be built in Australia and have Australian-specific modifications. For example, they will feature Australian-developed phase radar arrays and the US Aegis combat management system. The first ship was laid down in 2023, but it's expected to take a long time to commission. That is planned for 2031. Besides L-band long-range surveillance radars, it will have S-band multifunction radars as well as phased-array target illuminators. It is planned it will use both a hull-mounted sonar and that at least 3 ships will have a towed active and passive sonar. Basically the best sonars Britain can make today. But its missile count is what is raising some eyebrows. Initial design for the Hunter called for a modular mission bay and fairly conservative 32 vertical launch missile cells, on top of launchers for 8 dedicated anti-ship missiles. Said design is now being realized for the first batch of first 3 Hunter frigates. The second batch of 3 more frigates, however, may be based on a somewhat modified design. For now, it's not super clear if the Australian Navy is actually gonna go for the modified design. It's something BAE Systems offered. It includes deleting the modular mission bay and the towed sonar, basically making the ship less anti-submarine warfare oriented. But on the other hand, the design triples the numbers of vertical launch missiles and doubles the number of horizontal anti-ship missile tubes. The 96 vertical launch cells is the same number that the US Berg class has, even though that's a larger ship. Plus even the Berg doesn't carry 16 dedicated anti-ship missiles, but at best 8. Then again, Berg does have hangars for 2 helicopters, while Hunter makes do with just 1. Besides the fact that BAE Systems even made such a proposal, which doesn't seem to be needed by other users like the Royal Navy, Australia has recently decided to buy US Tomahawk missiles to be launched from ships. Anzac frigates can't launch them, and Hobart's missile cell count is barely enough to have them work as air defense destroyers. While Hobarts may find room to carry some, it's likely another class of ships will be equipping the brunt of those Tomahawks. In that light, the increase from just 32 cells, which would barely be enough for self-defense of the ship, to 96 cells makes sense. The 16 dedicated anti-ship missiles are gonna be NSMs, which are smaller than the current Harpoons, but due to newer tech, they still improve on range even if their warhead is smaller. NSM has been chosen to be the new go-to anti-ship missile of the Australian Navy, and it will replace now near obsolete Harpoons on all ships, including the current ones. Of course, future Tomahawk Block 5A missile adds long-range anti-ship capabilities. If Australia procures it, it will complement the NSM. Also, the US approved the sale of advanced SM-6 missiles to Australia. Those are very new, expensive and very potent missiles, primarily for air defense work, but they can even be used against some ballistic missiles and hypersonic gliders, as well as engage fixed land targets and moving ships. They're fired from the same vertical launch cells as Tomahawks or current Australian SM-2 missiles. Besides the 6 Hunter-class ships, another class of frigates is envisioned for the future, but it is not defined yet. It is known anti-submarine work will be its focus, which again may point to batch 2 Hunters indeed losing their towed sonars. Anyway, the plan is to order 3 ready-made ships from another country, from an established shipmaker using a tried and tested design, and then to have 8 more ships of the same class built in Australia. Those decisions clearly point towards urgency and the need for numbers being available quickly. The analysis paper already proposed/recommended 4 foreign frigate types to choose from. One is German Meko A200, which funnily enough is what the old Anzac frigates are based on. But keep in mind there's a myriad of Meko 200 designs around the world, and the underlying concept has been upgraded quite a lot over the decades. Second proposal is the South Korean Daegu frigate. It's a fairly new design, though based on older, smaller Incheon frigates. Another proposal is the Spanish Alpha 3000 frigate, which is quite new, not in service anywhere yet, but it is based on the smaller Avanti 2000 corvettes. All these 3 frigates point towards the Australian requirement being a roughly 3,500 ton design. It's only the 4th proposal, the Japanese Mogami frigate, which is noticeably larger at over 5,000 tons. Australian requirements for the small frigate also include the ability to operate a helicopter, a towed sonar, torpedo employment, self-defense air defense systems, which means short-range systems, and to curiously provide maritime and land strike capabilities, though the land strike may be covered simply by relying on NSM missiles, as those can be used against fixed sites on land. As the whole light frigate class is fairly undefined, let's leave it at that. and hop onto the more interesting optionally manned combat ships. Basically, those will be ships that can be sent on dangerous missions close to the enemy and operated without a crew on such missions. Not quite expendable ships, but certainly more expendable than sending a frigate with 100 or 200 crew members. What those ships will look like is unknown, but there are interesting bits of info in the analysis paper. The paper says they will have 32 vertical launch missile cells, and that they will offer multi-domain strike capacity. That means more than one mission set. Land attack and anti-ship attack seem like very safe bets. But the same paragraph also mentions ship would use Aegis combat management system. As Aegis is not cheap, it would make little sense to invest in it unless ships themselves don't have robust sensor and communication equipment. While that doesn't have to mean long-range anti-air systems, it's plausible self-defense anti-air and anti-missile sensors will be present, and that communications for third-party targeting may also be present. So, for example, the unmanned ship may be a picket ship out front, and an air defense destroyer at the back may use its radars to track an air target. The unmanned ship may then fire off a missile towards that target, which will then be fed data by the destroyer. But perhaps a more interesting paragraph about unmanned ships is this one, where it says optionally crewed ships should be acquired through engagement with the US Navy program as a fast follower. Basically, that means Australia plans to piggyback on the similar US program and simply build the same ships with perhaps some local modifications. Indeed, the US Navy program does offer a few more details about what such ships may be like. In September 2023, a report on those US ships was made available. Among other projects, there is the LUSV, a large unmanned surface vehicle. Their target length is 60 to 90 meters, their target displacement is 1,000 to 2,000 tons, and their payload when configured for missiles would be 16 to 32 VLS cells. Given that Australia defined 32 VLS cells as their requirement, it's plausible the end design will indeed be closer to 2,000 tons. That's a fairly robust corvette-sized ship. For example, China's numerous O-56A corvette is just 1,500 tons. The whole Australian analysis report is more than just a proposal. Australian government has already agreed with pretty much all its proposals. The report outlines a few items which are not fully agreed upon. For example, the government has only agreed in principle so far to fit the Hunter-class frigates with Tomahawk cruise missiles. Also, Hobart-class replacements, which is a long-term plan as those won't be needed until 2050 or so, is also agreed upon only in principle. The only thing not agreed with at all is the proposal to urgently upgrade Anzac frigates, so a capability gap would be avoided until new ships arrive. The government believes accelerated acquisition of new frigates will negate the need for modernized Anzacs. What the paper did not talk about is submarines, so let's cover those as well briefly. Australia currently has 6 conventional Collins-class submarines. Those were put into service from 1996 to 2003, and they will serve for a decade more, but they're increasingly seen as inadequate. Hence the whole media hoopla about replacing them with nuclear-fueled subs. That decision has already been made. Australia is to acquire at least 8 nuclear-fueled submarines. That will be a massive step up in capability when it happens. A nuke sub is in some situations worth several conventional subs, as it can stay underwater for months, not just days or weeks, and it can go several times faster while doing it. So we're talking about the several-fold capability increase from those current 6 conventional subs. The issue with the whole submarine plan, though, is actual realistic timelines. Senior US Navy officials have revealed to Australian media that the US would give second-hand Virginia-class nuke subs to Australia in 2032 and 2035, so a decade from now. In addition to that, completely new-built Virginia Block 7 submarines for Australia may reach service in 2038. The UCAS agreement, which kick-started it all, stipulated that the US would sell 3 second-hand Virginias, and that there's an option for Australia to buy 2 more new-built Virginias. Of course, that would mean Australia would be several subs short of its 8 submarine goal, but that's where the UK comes in. The UK will need a replacement for their Astute subs come 2040s. The new class, for now dubbed the UCAS class, will be present in both Royal and Australian navies. For Australia, early 2040s is the planned in-service date for the first UCAS class sub. From then on, every 2 to 3 years another sub is to be commissioned. 5 are expected by mid-2050s. And Australia would like to have all 8 subs to be made in Australia in the long-term future, though buying some subs directly from the UK is also an option. As we can see, those sub-plans are really long-term plans, unlike the surface fleet restructuring, which is expected to be finished a bit earlier. Right now, the last 6th Hunter-class frigate is planned for delivery in 2043. First 3 small frigates are expected to enter service before 2030, with the remaining 8 likely delivered by the 2040s. So, on one hand, Australia is definitely increasing its fleet, both in numbers and capability. But on the other hand, the increases will take a better part of the next 2 decades. Other countries in the neighborhood are all increasing their navies as well. Indonesia has already ordered a whole bunch of ships to be built, 3 more subs, which will have its submarine fleet expand to 6 in the future. 8 more large frigates were ordered from UK and Italy, and 2 second-hand smaller frigates. Those will replace 5 older smaller frigates and 3 older smaller corvettes. We made a video on Japan's navy increases, but in short, they're gonna be increasing their navy as well, with some 24 ships. Of course, as those will replace some ships scheduled for retirement, overall increase is not yet clear. China's plans aren't announced, but just looking at what it added in the last 10 years, it's plausible it's gonna add a similar number going forward. So, speaking in terms relative to its neighbors, Australia's navy may not end up being much more capable than it is today. Time will tell. And remember, Binkov may talk about war, but only real peace can bring us all together.